Hi, so I want to welcome everyone to the 18th Annual Tallgrass Film Festival, and I want to just also thank our sponsors and anyone who's joining us for this Q&A. I'm Estelle Grosso. I'm the Director of Educational Distribution at Kino Lorber, and joining me is the Director Mirra Bank. Her film No Fear, No Favor is in the Tallgrass Film Festival. And if you like what you see, make sure you let us know on Instagram and Facebook. We're at Tallgrass Film, and the hashtag is Tallgrass2020. So I'll get started with the questions with Mirra. Thank you so much for joining me. So No Fear, No Favor. Can you let us know a little bit about the origins of this project?
Absolutely. And are we also able to say that this film, No Fear, No Favor, is one of the 3 finalists for the DOXX Award this year at the festival, which I'm very excited about.
Yes, it is. It's an excellent film, and it's in great company.
Yeah, terrific to be in that company. So No Fear, No Favor really is very grounded in, I guess, my own interest and commitment to issues having to do with the environment, and also with the fact that environmental rights, I believe, are human rights. And one of the real triggers for making the film had to do with the involvement that my husband and I both had with the Nature Conservancy. And when we had an opportunity to be in Africa, we talked to them about programs that they were doing there. And I had a particular interest at that point also in the spike that was taking place in poaching. Obviously, one of the high profile charismatic animals that was involved was the elephant. Elephants and rhinos get a lot of publicity, and justly so in that way. But they are part of a bigger pattern of the decimation of wildlife that goes on for many reasons. So we were going to be in Cape Town in South Africa, and we said, do you have programs that we could sort of look at and get a deeper knowledge of, knowing that I was going to be doing some filming about this. And they said, not in South Africa, but would you guys be willing to go to Zambia? We have a new program in Zambia. And we said, absolutely. So they were really enablers. They helped us to connect to a very interesting anti-poaching program, at that time being headed up by a group called Game Rangers International. They're in the film. And then one thing led to another, and we became more deeply embedded in a much bigger reality of what is going on in not just Zambia, but any of the sub-Saharan countries that have wildlife and that have these both magnetic and very vulnerable ecosystems that are a source of income, but also a source of, tremendous danger in terms of the future and sustainability.
Great. So one of the things I love about the film is just how many different stories we got to see and how many different characters were involved from all sides of this issue. So one of my next questions is, how much of the story of the film did you have prepared before you started shooting, and how much changed or developed what your ideas were, or what you had in mind before you made the film, or did anything change in the editing process?
Everything, as always. I think with more complex documentaries, everything changes once you begin making them. That is not your impulse, not your reason for making them, but you have to start with a set of assumptions. You have to start with what you know and what your questions are. But in the end, it's the questions that need to finally make the film fruitful. And so I thought initially that we would be able to answer certain questions I had through the anti-poaching issues. And through community outreach to all of the populations that live in these areas where community meets wilderness. But in fact, in the process of working on the film, and also happily being able to spend time in other countries, I realized that anti-poaching is an important, critical element to this question of protecting wildlife, whole ecosystems. Wildlife is not separate from these larger environmental issues. But the other side of that is that most of the poachers are drawn from populations where people are very impoverished and have very few options about how they can care for their families, make a living, get a chance to have a little extra, for things that they may need or their families may need. So the real issue is, how do communities benefit from conservation? If you can tip that balance so that animals are worth more alive than dead, then you don't wipe out the international cartels, you don't wipe out the high profile middlemen, who are working also for these cartels, but you do begin to change hearts and minds and behavior and values on the ground, because those are the people who are going into these wilderness areas. They know them better than anyone. They've been there for generations in most cases. And once they change their value system and change their sense of their relationship from poachers to protectors, that's a huge piece of protecting these animals and these environments. So what that led to, actually, for me, was a shift in understanding that an equal piece of this story was the conservancy side. In community conservancies, the communities are the primary stakeholders. The models vary tremendously from country to country, but the premise is that communities manage these conservation entities, which are often primarily geared toward ecotourism. And until COVID-19, ecotourism was an immense part of Africa's, growing financial profile, representing upwards of $30 billion, per year, and that makes a huge difference. And the idea was for community conservancies to become a bigger and bigger part of the beneficiaries of that income, so that the people who live there care for the animals, protect them, get tremendous educational and workplace opportunities in guiding and running hotels and managing environmental projects, whether they're botanical or whether they're about veterinary services, and that the communities share in a much, much larger amount in the income from ecotourism. And that way, it's all about the future. It's not about the short range, killing an animal and delivering it to someone who gives you really a pittance compared to what the ivory or the tusks will be worth at the other end. And you've lessened the future for that very species that you've just poached. So in the opposite model, it's all about protecting and expanding the possibility for those species to thrive so that you and your community also thrive.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I definitely learned a lot about that watching this documentary. So that was great. So in the documentary, we do get to meet not only the conservationists, we meet poachers, and like as a filmmaker, you're basically embedded with them. So if you could tell me a little bit about how you built trust with them, and how much did they get to shape the way their stories were told, or how did those relationships work?
Well, I would say in a general way, all over the world, those initial context and the source or the basis of the trust often comes from who brings you into the picture. And in our case, we were being brought in by, from the United States side, by the Nature Conservancy, but also by their Africa program, people who spent a lot of time in Africa, and handed over to the African people who were running those programs initially in Zambia. So that was enormous in terms of having the trust of where we came from, who were we, what did we want, what were we doing there. And from within that, we were able to stay in Zambia, within the Game Rangers International sort of family, and also within some of the ecotourism groups that cooperate with game rangers and other groups that are protecting wildlife. And within that nexus, there are people who are poachers and who have become protectors. So initially, when we meet our first poacher, he was a serious elephant poacher, Kingsley, in our film. And what we discover in the course of the film is his transformation. So I spent time with Kingsley, talking with him, and in his environment, in the wilderness, gun on his shoulder, only in this case, not out to kill animals, but on the lookout in order to protect them. And I think one side of that is always making it clear to people that you want them to be heard. You want them to be able to project who they are, what their experience is, and what they want the world to know about them, rather than a list of questions you may have come with. Now, obviously, I know, based on my own experience, because this is something I cared about, and really I knew nothing about community conservancies before I got involved in the Africa side of it. So one big issue was to be able to get people to talk about their own experience in a way that could inform people here about the value of that model for Africa and ultimately for any other places in the world where similar situations exist. I mean, it's a model that can work in Asia, it can work in the Caribbean, it can work in Latin America. It's a question of setting up the model that's right for that environment. So in the case of someone like Annette, she's a woman who's a wildlife police officer who's done really dangerous undercover work, presenting herself as someone she's not in order to entrap poachers, getting arrested with them, and then going back out into the field, often having to go out into places far from her home base because you have to be unknown to the people that you're doing undercover work with, spying on, basically. And that takes a lot of courage. This is a single mother who's raising 3 little girls. And again, in getting to know Annette, and I probably got to know her better than almost anyone, I spent time not only with her, but with her children, as you see in the film. And my entree and my baseline with Annette was what it means for women to be able to have this role in the culture, and for their children, and in her case for her daughters, to see themselves differently, to see themselves empowered, and as people who make a difference every single day in something that is ordinarily thought of as a man's world. And that was certainly an important connection for us in my giving her a platform for what she wanted people to know about her.
Yeah, she was really powerful. I believe it was Annette who said her niece said she just wants to be like her when she grows up. And so that was really, she was a great character in the film, a great personality too. So yeah, I love that, the female angle. It's very interesting. Because,
And Annette, I'll just say Annette was both really proud of the uniform side of it. She talks about that also in relation to her niece, but also constantly always pushing the educational side. She, in the time between when I first met her and when I saw her again, she had gone and done a whole other level of schooling. She was very, very interested in the data gathering and analysis, not just in the field work as a law enforcement person, but also really on the scientific side. And that was a dream also for her own kids and her commitment to their education. So that's what the future is. The future, it's about women and girls and people at the community level having agency and getting what they need. And it has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's the film's so powerful in getting that point across, I think. And it is really important. So then the next question I have is, what was the most challenging for you to capture? However you want to take that. If you could just talk about that for a little bit. And if there was any moments when the filmmaking process changed drastically from what you were thinking was gonna happen.
Well, we were pretty much always shooting in places where you don't have the kind of infrastructure that you do if you're shooting in this country. You know, most of the time you're in places where there isn't regular electricity, many times no internet, or internet intermittently only at certain times of day. Certainly no like replacement parts, you know, or so you learn to have backups for your backups. You know, it's a plan A, B, C, and D for what might happen in the field while you're shooting. Whenever you drive anywhere, you're charging all your batteries, you know, off the Jeep. Most of the Jeeps actually are equipped with a kind of electrical outlets that people charge things on, because that's how people get a lot of the battery power that they work with in the field. And so you quickly learn to, you know, utilize those situations every minute that you can. And I was a one-person crew, basically. I mean, I was really fortunate because I was working with my husband, who has some film experience also and has worked with me on other films. So he was a second camera and a second set of eyes. But I was really shooting and doing sound and directing, and that was challenging in and of itself. One of the particular incidents that happened was when we were filming, this was in Namibia, the rhino story that we did, or one of the rhino stories. It's not in our film, but we were actually rammed pretty severely by a black rhino mother.
Oh, wow.
With her calf. And it disabled the vehicle we were in for some period of time.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't in any way life-threatening, but it was a reminder, you know, it was a reminder that you're in these situations and you feel, because you're there for the right reasons and, you know, with the right impulses, that nothing bad should happen. But these are the kinds of things that can be extremely unforeseen and can happen. We were not that far from other Jeeps, and, you know, ultimately we had to repair the Jeep in order to get out of there. But sometimes a black rhino will come back and ram a vehicle multiple times. I didn't want to be the story. The story wasn't about me or about, you know, the filming, so that wasn't in it. But the personal reminder of it, and the sense of never stop shooting. I do have it on film, and it will be on the DVD extras. I made a little short out of it. It gives you, maybe it's a sort of illusion of you have to keep shooting. You just don't stop. If you're in danger, you don't stop. You keep shooting. And I think that's true for me also when I'm with the people in the field or people I'm interviewing. It's always what might happen the moment after you turn the camera off. So if you want to talk about difficulties, it's knowing that you have a limited amount of batteries, a number of batteries, and yet the desire not to stop staying in the moment, you know. And I think maybe that duality in telling a story in a situation where your resources are limited, for me, was a kind of psychic difficulty. And I think apart from that, you have to be patient, and you don't know when the next leopard kill or, you know, lion charge is going to happen. But, you know, you have to be prepared to say, well, we didn't get it that time, you know, go on to the next moment. But I would say mostly it was the conditions of making something where you want, if you're Nat Geo, if you're making that kind of film, you have unlimited resources, unlimited cameras, unlimited generators. When you're a one-person crew with a Jeep and a guide and a lot of goodwill from the people you're working with, it's a different situation. So absolutely, that was the difficulty.
Wow, yeah, I look forward to seeing the rhino short on the DVD. That's very, and that's funny, but also I'm sure quite scary. So just to finish things up, if you'd like to tell our viewers what's next for the film, and, you know, if you're working on any new projects or still, you know, with this one.
Sure. Well, we have several festivals coming up, some in this country, some in Europe, and we'll also be doing, so I hope, with New York Women in Film, which was one of the funders of the film, one of the backers of the film. It was a wonderful post-production award. They had originally wanted to do it as a, you know, theatrical event in New York, and with COVID, we had to delay that. So I think what will be coming up is a number of these sort of quasi-theatrical virtual screenings, both with NIWIFT and with some other organizations. We very much want to do more with the Nature Conservancy, with other conservation groups, just in terms of getting the word out. For me, the biggest future for this film really is in finding environmental audiences. I mean, I think the beauty of our mission is that it's one that's doable without an enormous infrastructure, but I think people have to know and understand what community conservation is in places like Africa and other parts of the world where the model, you know, the wilderness model is different. And so it's educating audiences about this so that they can go out and support organizations that support this work. Any of the active wilderness conservation groups that have community outreach programs generally have some part of what they're doing that's supportive of this form of conservation. And I think we have to do it now, we have to do it quickly, and we have to do it wholeheartedly. I haven't said enough about both Namibia and Kenya. Each of them has had community conservation for longer than Zambia, which is why I included that in the film. They have more developed programs, but it's always bringing people on board. It's a hearts and minds issue, winning people over and helping them to see the value of it, and then supporting it. And as soon as people can, when this is over, go to a wilderness area. If you can't afford it, it's expensive to do, go as a volunteer. There are many volunteer programs. Find out about community conservation projects in any part of Africa and do what you can to support them, either as a volunteer or as someone who donates to them, or go there yourself if you can and go deeper into this. And particularly for women and girls, it's changing the paradigm. It's giving them agency and empowerment in ways that they wouldn't ordinarily have, or that they traditionally haven't had. And it's creating an array of new ways of making a living for everyone that is very, very important. So the film is is going to be going out in that way. We are talking with several distributors. We're not yet in distribution, but we hope that that soon will happen. We're very eager for that to happen, and that will give us a platform for these other, bigger sort of post-festival ways of getting the word out. I am working on a very exciting project in the Middle West. I can't say too much about it, except it's one that involves, again, women, and it will look both at issues of decriminalizing aspects of the drug problem, and also changing the whole dynamic of what happens to women who have had an addiction problem and have small children. So it's a very important project for me, and I'm fortunately connected to a wonderful doctor and leader in the Middle West who runs her own program in this regard and has a lot of support from within the hospital community for it. And so I will have a kind of proprietary access to this story, which I think is so important, both from a criminal justice point of view and again, equal agency for women and respect for the bond of family that I think is very important.
Well, that sounds really amazing and exciting, and we'll look forward to seeing that next project as well. And certainly, I'm no fear, no favor. We'll have a robust life ahead of it. So that will wrap up my questions. And I just want to say thank you again to Mirra Bank, the award-winning director of No Fear, No Favor, for joining me for this Q&A. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Tallgrass Film Festival.
Thank you so much. It's great to be in this company.